Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Dandadan, Season 1, Episode 3. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we get an introduction to Momo's grandmother. Her stage name is Santa Dodoria. Maybe that's just like her name in general, like maybe Dodoria is, but it all seems like that's more like her stage name. But I love we're introduced to her. She's a psychic on television being like, this guy's, you're 27. He's like, I'm 20. She's like, you're married with a kid. And he's like, I'm single. She's like, your favorite food is curry. And he's like, it's ramen. And all the producers and stuff are like, oh man, she's terrible. And some of the people from the, I guess, news station or television station are bowing and apologizing for everything. And they're like, wow, she's kind of like completely wrong, isn't she? Oh, well, I guess we'll just air the episode anyway. They should. I hope they did air the episode considering like she was super right. But who's to say they didn't edit around it in some regards? So, but either way, like the moment she's in the taxi with that guy, he's like, oh, aren't you Santa Dodoria? And he's like, I want to see if your whole thing is real. She got annoyed. Well, she's like, one, you want to scram before you end up getting killed because she can sense what's happening near her home. But also it's like she's had to deal with that ridicule for so many years, people thinking she's a fake and stuff like that. So, but yeah. Ken is completely being taken over by Granny, Turbo Granny, and she's trying to attack Momo, but then we get to see Dodoria in action. I love the whole like bat thing, especially when you find out it's kind of like a makeshift pencil. It can open up to be like a makeshift pencil, which I'm like, that's so cool. It allows her to draw circles and probably like it's part of her powers as a spirit medium, which I think is so interesting. Like basically she has these spiritual nails that the moment she because she threw like a block and then she struck a nail with it, and that ended up hurting Turbo Granny. It's like Turbo Granny's super fast, but Dodoria is like really good at what she does, so she already had a trap set up, and it's like, ooh, I've got this barrier set up, and the reason why you couldn't hurt me is because I've already put down one of these nails, and like the nails outside, once the nails inside the circle, that means everything outside that circle is the barrier. But because the nail is outside that circle, that's why your only safe space for Turbo Granny is in that circle. I was like, that's a really ingenious trap. And the fact is, she had the wherewithal to set that up in motion. It's like, yeah, she isn't just, because I think it's because Momo is just so like, it feels like Momo can be more bronze than brains sometimes. She definitely has that like, they both like, I mean, Momo's personality, we definitely see where she gets it from. Her grandmother seems a little more jokey than her, but it also seems like because even then it's like they still have that same sensibility. They both got that Yankee type of delinquent feel to them. But Turbo Granny's trying to warn her, like, oh my god, like, you do this and the kid inside is going to die. But for her, it's like, she's just assuming, like, right, anyone Momo's bringing here is just some terrible person. So she doesn't know, like, Momo's got a connection with Ken. And so it's like, right, I'm going to have to, like, kill you or whatever. So it's bye-bye. I love how she handled that. She drew another circle outside that circle, and that new circle was outside of the nail. So she erased the circle that Granny was trapped in. And now that barrier is burning her. Once again, just the layers to that whole situation. I really appreciate this episode giving us kind of a lot of world building and explaining like a lot of the lore of like the spirit world and how things kind of work. And specifically how Dodoria like handles her situation, like her powers and stuff. Because I was misconstruing Momo's abilities with what her grandmother can do, because it's like, right, it is psychic abilities, and I guess there is an overlap with what her grandmother does, but once again, her grandmother is a spirit medium. Her power is being the medium that can channel the spirits and stuff. That's more so how that works versus Momo, who her power comes from within herself, but where does that come from? Is it something that the aliens did to her in conjunction with like her spirit mediumness? Like I said, it's just like how those talismans work on not only keeping out ghost spirits like Turbo Granny, but also it hurts aliens too, because there is some like overlap between like ghost spirits and aliens. There is some like overlap there that we haven't really gotten into, but nevertheless, it's like, oh, did she really like... I mean, there's no way she killed Ken, so you're like, what happened there? And she's like being very like dismissive of Momo. Once again, personality wise, she's just like her grandchild because she holds a grudge. Because I think I brought this up in episode 1. We don't know how long, like, we saw that she was obviously distinctly younger when she, like, stopped believing in her grandmother being a spirit medium because she didn't like being ostracized for it. But we don't know when she started believing her grandmother again. Was it immediately? And it's been a couple years since she's had to deal with her grandmother's spite, being like, oh, I'm not a real medium, right? I'm a big old fake. None of this is real. And it's like, oh, grandma, she's like, shut up and stop bringing that up. You're not going to let that go. So her grandmother's petty. Because it's like, yeah, you've denounced me and everything that I'm all about for years. And like I said, I don't know when Momo started believing her again. Well, was it like a couple months before the series started? Has it been years she started believing her? I feel like it's probably only got to be like weeks or months when she kind of grew that appreciation from her grandmother. For her grandmother to still be this petty doesn't feel like that would have been years ago, but it still feels like it's a fresh enough wound where it's like she finally started believing again. But like I said, it feels super recent, but I don't know if they'll ever really bother answering that question. Either way, she's bringing up the whole point about Ken and everything. And it's like, right, the reason why he got cursed in the first place. For her, it's like, if anything happens to him, it's on me. I'm the one that convinced him to go to that tunnel and get cursed by Granny. It's like, please don't let him be dead. Is because she feels the most responsible for him. But then she goes and sees that he's perfectly fine. He's in that little shrine area and it's keeping him as Ken and not, it's pushing back the curse. And seeing that he was okay, she gets upset, slams the door. And even though he was just like, oh my God, Momo, I thought I killed you. I guess Momo's grandmother didn't bother answering any questions. But yeah, or maybe he was knocked out and by the time he woke up, he was inside that place and he recognized like, oh, if I step out of here, I turn back. I don't know. Like, who knows what conversation may or may not have happened. But yeah, she's upset because she was worried about nothing. And I think it bothers her that she's like, oh, like I was stressing out like I really care about him. But for her, it's like, yeah, this guy was only like looking for a friend. I'm his only friend. And how do I handle that? I like chastise him and convince him to go to that tunnel. And he gets, once again, it takes two to tango. He did send you to a place where you were abducted and you were about to be, assaulted by aliens. So, I think we can call this a little even. I think the only thing is maybe he has a leg up because he got cursed and his penis is gone now. But still, it's pretty even killed. We're both, once again, it takes two to tango. You're both at fault. And I think at the same time, Ken doesn't blame her. And I think that also plays into her guilt about it, that he doesn't and he would never. He just wants her as a friend. And I love that conversation they had later on when he was just like, I'm sorry if I disappointed you. It's like, all I cared about when I was fighting was like protecting myself. But you took so much damage and you were still looking out for me and protecting me. You were doing all that while fighting. It's like, you're pretty badass. And I'm sorry if I disappointed you, but I'll do better next time. So don't be disappointed in me. Please still be my friend. It's like, that's heartbreaking. But it's like, yeah, he has such an inferiority complex when it comes to friends. And I get that. You're afraid that you finally have someone that's a friend and you're scared to like scare them off because of who you are. And you're like, I'm afraid that I'm going to do something that let you down. Because we don't know, like maybe Ken did have friends at one point in time, but they outgrew him or left him behind the moment he latched on to aliens and the occult. But it's like, well, we know he latched on to the aliens and occult stuff because he didn't have any friends. So maybe that's something we'll find out about his story. Maybe that he did have friends, but they outgrew him or left him behind. Or like I said, maybe it is just a straight up fact of he never had any friends. We'll have to wait to see. Like it leans more towards the not having friends at all, but I could definitely see it being a thing they later on kind of dive into more of like, no, he did at one point in time, but just ended up losing them. But either way, like Dodoria is telling Momo that she should just leave Ken alone. It's not her responsibility. But for her, it's like, no, the Ken-san that I love and respect so much says that he would never abandon someone in this situation. I made a promise to help him out and I'm going to see that through. And she's like, ooh, so you really do like this boy. She's like, no. I'm not talking about that Ken. I'm talking about the actor Ken. And she's like on the other side, like, ooh, do you hear that, kid? So... But yeah, some other elements we learned. We learned that Turbo Granny used to be known as, 100 kilometers Granny. So it makes sense. I love that being kind of like her old school name. But it's like, yeah, more modernizing it, just being Turbo Granny. I like that. But we also learned that as a spirit medium, once again, her constitution and circumstances are different from Momo's psychic powers, is that for Dodorio, like to use her barriers and stuff, she draws on the gods of this land, and basically there's different gods that invoke power in different territories. So the god of their territory is what lets her use her barriers and stuff. And it's like, I want you outside of that territory, which would be where the tunnel where Granny is her powers will be useless. So that's why it's up to Momo and Ken to resolve this. More so specifically, Ken has to be the one to outpace Granny, and I guess that would be him calling upon the power of the curse to battle that. I guess that'd be the only means. As we've seen, he is ridiculously fast in that form, but I'm sure Granny can still outpace him, because he even says that he can only use it for like 2 times before he burns out from it. It's like, well, you have to build up your stamina, you have to work out. It's time for a training montage, except they don't really get to it, but it's like, you got to do push-ups, sit-ups, all this. You need to train your stamina up so you can draw out more of that power. Then there's the Momo of it all, where it's like she recognizes, like, yeah, we get more explanation about her power, especially how she's able to hold back the curse. It's basically a visualization of when she uses her psychic powers, there's 2 giant hands there, and there's like this dark aura around Ken, and she's able to kind of smother that in her hands and like clamp it down, and that's how she like stifles the curse, at least mitigating it. And she says like everything and everyone has an aura, and she can interact and control that, or like grasp onto that aura and move stuff, but it's still within a small radius. The power she felt when she first awakened her powers was like a burst of everything all at once, but in true like typically JRPG fashion, she kind of got nerfed immediately, because whatever brought that about, like all that power came out at once, and now the rest of it is behind like some barriers. It's kind of like, I've been reading quite a few webtoons like that, where it's like, oh, you have this special ability immediately, but then it immediately gets locked behind some like video game stats and stuff. Like there's a series I'm reading called, oh god, there's like 2 of them. I think it's Reality Quest is the one I'm thinking of. It's a webtoon manhwa. Highly recommend you check it out. But there's another one kind of having a similar premise of like life becomes like a video game. There's quite a few webtoon manhwa that utilize that motif as a style for the story. But I'm using like Reality Quest because like he has a super powerful technique that immediately gets locked away, and he has to basically build back up to unlocking it again, type of thing. So Momo's in that category of she has to build back up and train so that she's able to access a lot of that power she was in that first episode. So the question then becomes, why did it get locked away? Where does this, once again, this power stem from? Because it seems like it's a smashing of the spiritual powers of her grandmother. I would assume Ghana got passed down to her, plus something else. Since her means of drawing that power came about because of her grandmother telling her how to like draw her like chi from her abdomen and stuff. So I'm wondering, is it something the aliens did to her in conjunction with her spirit medium powers that led to the psychic abilities? Considering it's not like just a telekinetic thing. It's like it is psychic abilities that also work on spirits and aliens. So. But I do love this situation with Momo telling Ken, like, right, I'm most likely going to end up saving you again, but it's kind of like, don't worry, we're kind of in this together type of situation. But, being nice to him and apologizing, because he snapped at her being like, oh, if you're not disappointed in me, then why'd you slam the door in my face? She's like, oh, that was, I'm not disappointed. He's like, you really are disappointed in me, aren't you? And she's like, no, it's not like that. It's because it's the kin of it all. It's because she's not disappointed. If anything, she's disappointed in herself because she can't believe she got so like worried about him. It's like, why do I care so much? I mean, he's like, yeah, I mean, I consider him a friend, but like, I don't really care that much about anyone. It's like, even though him making my heart flutter in the first episode, she's trying her hardest. Once again, that's why he's Okaru, because it's like, you're not going by your real name around me. Which I do love that when her and her grandmother were chasing after him, her grandmother called him by his name, and you see in that moment she kind of floats in the air and kind of swoons a little bit. Yeah, because it's like dad, his real name is like kryptonite to her, just because it makes her just immediately think of like the actor she's super into. Which I'm wondering, are we going to meet him in this series? I wonder. I was about to say, like, not unless we find out that the actor she's into has some relation to Ken, but I'd assume not. I'm curious to find out who he is, and they got to meet at some point during the series. Like Momo, the Ken that she's into, and this Ken Okuru, and like those three have got to be around each other at some point in time. And I'm assuming by that point in the story, or at least later on in the story, it's going to be a thing of what she felt for that Ken no longer feels the same way as how she feels about Okuru. Once again, it might not be an immediate thing, like even when they meet the real Ken, maybe that'll happen early on in the story, but it could be a thing of they meet early on, but eventually in the story, that feeling she had for the Ken-san disappears and she only likes the Ken from her school. I could definitely see a story beat like that happening. But yeah, poor Ken having to use the bathroom, and it's like he can't be too far away from her because she needs to have eyes on you, because it's like, right, as we learned last episode, even closing the door, if she's not keeping her eye on him, like it doesn't work. She even tried visualizing using her other senses to kind of represent like, okay, I got my eyes closed, I'm using the touch of my psychic powers, and it still didn't work. She got to train up. So it's still that weakness of, at least for now, she still has to be nearby and keeping an eye on him to allow his power to subside the curse to some extent, So, but yeah, he's like needing to use the bathroom and stuff like that. And it's like, well, the only way around that is that Momo would have to watch him, which he's like, I'm stuck between, I would rather, I'd have to get rid of my shame and, use the bathroom in front of her, or I'd have to wet myself. But it's like, I'd much rather not wet myself. That's the thing I probably don't want the most. So he rushes to the bathroom and she's like, whoa, what are you doing? Like, who said you could just take a dump in my... I was like, is he pissing or is he taking a dump, or is he doing both? Either way, they rush to the bathroom and it all happens. So she's at least like keeping an eye on him without fully keeping an eye on him. But then Turbo Granny shows up, because it turns out, I love that reveal. She's like, oh, because I can curse anyone that has made direct eye contact with the boy I've cursed. So now Devoria is now cursed as well. And he's like, I can insta kill anyone I want to. So it's like, you don't have the training time that you thought you did. Come to that tunnel now. Because the whole plan they ended up concocting was basically Dodorio has been there to that tunnel, and basically there are certain spirits that are stuck to locations, and the spirit of that location ended up combining with Turbo Granny. I guess at first when she was talking about spirits stuck to a location, I thought she was referencing Turbo Granny, but it seems like Turbo Granny, well, she can come and go, but she's bound to that tunnel simply because she fused with some other spirit there, and now it's made her more powerful, that even a medium would have a hard time. Even, well, obviously she's limited in what she can do that far out from her territory, so, but it's like she's become ridiculously powerful, and that's the whole point, to draw her out and get her as far away from that territory of the tunnel, so that once you're beyond that bound, Turbo Granny will be severely weakened, and then both Momo and Ken would be able to kill her. So that was the original plan, but Granny's expedited. It still could be the plan that they need in the long run, but yeah, they just have less time now. It's like, wow, Turbo Granny was like, you know what? I'm not going to give you... She must have been overhearing things. Like, I'm not giving you time to get stronger. Come to the tunnel now, or I'm going to kill your grandmother. So I even thought it was interesting too, when you look at like the talisman on the wall or whatever, it looked kind of shaded in red. Like part of it had Granny had, because she is so powerful and kind of like she's sending her will and power through Ken. It kind of, and because she's back in the tunnel in full force, it's like it became too much for that place to handle. I guess Granny was able to kind of send just for a little while, send that message and bleed it through, but staying too long would damage her. So but I think that's kind of representative with the talismans potentially being damaged like they are. So our crew gets decked out and they have to go handle this. It's all geared as supposed to help fight against spirits, which Momo immediately changes later on, even though grandmother told her this would help her. She's all about listening to her grandmother now and believing her, but for her, it's like, nah, I want to see this through because my grandmother got hurt. It's not just about Ken anymore. It's about, lifting the curse and getting his penis back. But it's also like, nah, she hurt my grandmother, and we've learned in episode 1 how much her grandmother means to her, and how she's ride or die for her grandmother. And it's like, anyone bad talks my grandmother or does anything to hurt her, they've got hell to pay. So, but yeah, she changes into her own battle attire, because she's like, right, being fashionable is kind of a battle attire. And I guess by being more herself, that might awaken more of her powers, because it's like, right, your grandmother's handling things her way. Your circumstances and constitution with your psychic powers might be a whole other ballpark. So it might be to your benefit, but it might also be to your detriment. We'll ultimately have to wait to see where the next episode takes us with all of this, as they go and deal with Turbo Granny. That took me by surprise, because I wasn't expecting that to immediately happen like that. Once again, it's that thing of okay, I wonder, is it this quickly in the manga pacing wise? It happens this early, or things dragged out a little bit more in the manga? Maybe there's a little more training montage, or maybe it's just now we jump to Turbo Granny immediately, even in the manga. So I don't know. Once again, a lot of stuff can get skipped or heavily condensed in an anime adaptation. So it's until I read the manga myself, I wouldn't be able to compare and contrast. So unless you've read the manga, I'd love to know. Like I said, you don't have to get into specifics, but is the battle against Turbo? I'm very specific about it. Where we are right now in the story, does things kind of happen that fast where it's we immediately have to go to Turbo Granny now? Doesn't mean because there's always a possibility they fight Turbo Granny next episode and still don't beat her, but come out of it winning, and they just got to train up. It feels like this might be the conclusion for the Turbo Granny stuff, in the regards of we win the fight, but that whole thing for can persist throughout, obviously, the entire series. So, I don't know. We'll see how they handle that next episode, but I'm excited to see what happens. But before I end this, I do want to go back on something I did skip over. Obviously, her grandmother was still giving her a lot of shit, but then she is like, Momo, and walks over and hugs her, and she's like, do not die. Because, yeah, she might give her shit and stuff like that, might talk smack, but it's you are her granddaughter. Potentially the only family she has left, because she raised you, so that means your parents are in the picture. I'd assume they're dead, but maybe they're just not in your life. I'm leaning more towards dead, but there's always a possibility they just walked out on you. But it's yeah, you're the only people in this world each other has in that regard. So I thought that was a really sweet and powerful moment between them. But yeah, I'm very excited to see what the next episode has in store for us. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.